the same pattern as we do, but that's far east over that way. And the same weather pattern?
Do you guys have any questions before we... Raven? Ravon, sorry.
But homework assignment is going to be the same thing. Like, I lifted, then you said there's another assignment. It's pretty much, I lifted the model.
Everything is the same. Yeah, the best way to do it is do an audio or two a week. And so when it comes time for the longer essay, you're basically done. Now, the assignments are very much like dating. You're always going to date the same people. And as you grow and mature and understand more, your relationship to people are going to change. For right now, you're going to look at the assignments, you're going to say, oh, this is the exact same thing I did last week, and the week before, and the year before, and the months before. And it's true. Nothing ever changes until you inject some change into it. So the idea of me creating assignments that are going to entertain you, that's not going to happen. It's like Groundhog. Have you seen the movie?
Groundhog Day?
Yeah. It's very much like that. I mean, the movie has a lot of flaws, especially that love takes care of everything. No, that's not true. But yeah, for the most part, it's going to be that.
Yeah, I was thinking, pick a different, why wouldn't you pick the same model anyway, the same audio?
Oh yeah, you have to choose someone different.
Like over time, like after listening to all the audios, you be adding more audios, so you don't end up like...
No, just one is good. I mean, you have 6 of them, I think. That should keep you busy, and it's only 20 minutes or 30 minutes each, maybe. Yeah, some of them are very short. Just, find something interesting.
Then it's okay if you like listen to the same audio and ask a different question about that.
Sure, yeah. Just, make things easy for yourself. Yes?
So for like the shorter audios, you just like one detailed question or like more than one detailed question?
It's up to you, really. Remember, the more detailed you are in the questions, the easier time you'll have doing the essay. Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Anyone else? No?
Anyone got new coffee yet?
I'm sorry?
Anyone got new coffee yet?
Oh, yeah.
No, I need your bribery.
Maria, any question? Comments before we...
Before we get started?
Yeah, or you can start.
Oh.
And then I'll piggyback on that.
I just want to talk about the moth to the flame, like spiritual path.
Okay.
I don't know, I just it's just one that I just keep listening to over and over and over again. Just sort of obsessively.
Okay.
And I just want more, information. Yeah.
So the story of moth and flame, or moths and the flame, it comes from this particular branch of the Islamic tradition called Sufism. It's very much like the Christian Desert Fathers. You have Christians and then you have Christian Desert Fathers who want to imitate Christ both in body and soul. And so the first category of Christians are just Christians in name. The second category of Christians, they're very, very, very different. They feel as if they have a calling of sorts, so they walk away, very much like Jesus, from their parents, from society. They observe this thing called fasting, not just not eating food, but also not eating emotional nourishment, not eating intellectual nourishment. And they take shelter under, it's a title of a book. No one knows who the author is. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. Now, the interesting aspect about this particular book, or the title, The Cloud of Unknowing, is first, none of us in this class enjoy being under a cloud. Cloud blocks the sun. It keeps you from warmth, from light. And so your body doesn't really enjoy being cold and being frozen. And then, whose phone is that? And then unknowing has to do with the fact that, kind of like what we talked about on Tuesday, if you examine human life from the dawn of history, we've really only been pursuing power. Power over other people, power over nature, power over ourselves. And so this idea of being in the unknown, being in the dark, is a very traumatic experience. It's like you're in a relationship, and all of a sudden your companion after 5 or 6 or 10 years or 10 months comes to you and says, I've never loved you. In fact, he or she is my true companion. And all of a sudden the foundation you built your life on, your identity, your meaning, your purpose, it just falls apart. And what you have in the Christian Desert Fathers is that they enjoy being under the cloud of unknowing. So Sufism is very much like that. There are people who are, good morning, Kendra. There are people who are Muslim in name, and there are governments in name, of Islam and Islamic tradition, what we call theocracy. And then there are those who kind of look at life, examine it and say, maybe it doesn't really have much worth and value. Life is short, time is limited, desires are plentiful, but I want to pick and choose the desires that best serve me. And so what you have in the story of moths and the flame, what you have are 4 different categories of people. And I suppose it could relate to this class, it could relate really to all of life, Good morning. So you have a king moth. I suppose you could consider the king moth to be someone with a good amount of authority, wisdom, experience. It's kind of like a god, who wants to test to see who is going to be worthy of carrying a certain type of a cross. Let's just say you have cancer, or I have cancer, and you want to know if your kids are mature enough to know what to do with the money you're going to leave behind for them. So you give one $20, you give one $50, you give one $100. Or let's just say you give each a $20 bill. One goes and smokes it away, one goes and porns it away, the other goes and, buys a bike, and the other saves it. And even though you like your kids, maybe even love them if you're that unlucky, what you say to yourself is, well, the first one who smoked it away is not really worthy of my inheritance. Neither is the second one. The third one's okay. A bicycle is not a bad thing. But the fourth one, he knows the value of money. He knows the value of work, of effort, of blood, of sweat, of the dangerousness of poverty, for example. So I'll just give it to him. Now, and for those of you who like to ask a lot of questions in this class, other classes, for those of you who like to read books, for those of you who like to think, for those of you who think that, your position in life have any value, I'm sure it does for you. The story kind of removes some of the assumptions, fallacies of thinking and being. So this particular king or moth or elder chooses 4 moths or 4 students. He says, listen, and one of the things about moths is that, for those of you who have ever observed a moth flying around, is that for some odd, strange, cursed reason, they're always going to be attracted towards light or flame. And the problem with fire is that once the moth gets very, very close, they'll just die. And that's a funny thing. That, you're quacking around, you have your life, you have your wife or husband or kids, and all of a sudden, a fire appears in your life. Whether it's a quest to get to know yourself, whether it's you have found another companion, that your tradition says, no, you shouldn't do that, but you follow it nevertheless. Maybe you're in the last couple of years of your MD program, but all of a sudden you have found business or accounting very, very, very pleasurable and enjoyable, and you got to be nuts for that. But the point is you walk away because, again, for some magical, strange reason, fire seems to be very attractive. Now, one of the things about us human beings, it doesn't matter who you are, what your skin color is, and what your age is. You can't escape being attracted to fire. And fire can be a whole host of things. It doesn't need to be spiritual or intellectual. Fire can only be representative of desires. You can't survive without desires. Desire is the foundation of hope. Desire is the foundation of movement, being an engaged animal of any kind. You don't come to this class just for no good reason. You have a certain amount of hope. Even if you're bored, silly, and you're suicidal, well, you come to this class for hope. You don't want to think about suicide. You don't want to think about being a loser. You want to make something of your life, okay? We are governed by desire. The very fact that we breathe, move, make any movement towards anything is an indication that we are hungry. We long, yearn for something, okay? Now, the moth, though, the king moth, is not really interested in any type of a desire. He looks at the moths and says, I want you guys to go on a journey, and your journey is going to be towards fire. Go see what it is, discover what it is, feel what it is, taste what it is, and then come back and tell it to me. There was a book that came out maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I think it's called Gang Leader for a Day. It was a PhD dissertation by this Indian kid, University of Chicago. And he said, I want to do my dissertation on the projects. So he took the idea to his advisor, to the committee. And one of the things that almost all the advisors had in common was that, listen, you're an Indian kid, you're going to the projects, they don't welcome foreigners, aliens, because they have no idea who you are. A project is a community of people in which there is trust, there is faith, there are lots of things that are happening, and they're not going to welcome you. And he says, you know what, I am tired of sitting in my office reading books and just writing down information. I don't want to do that. I want to get my hands dirty. I want to go in there and see what it's like. Levi Strauss, who was both a philosopher, sociologist, anthropologist, he was a man of all tricks. He had always believed that it's very difficult to examine a culture, understand a culture, by approaching it in an armchair way. And so when it was time for him to understand the natives, for example, he actually went and lived with them. He went around the world and just lived with people, no different than Mother Teresa, So as this Indian kid approached the projects and all the African Americans who lived there, the community was very suspicious of this guy. It took him about a year or so to gain the trust of some people. And then eventually he had a chance to meet the guy who actually leads the entire community. He had runners, they get drugs, they go to places, they sell them, they bring back the money. And so this leader, this guy looks at this kid and says, you think that all of us are criminal. Let me tell you what we do with the money or the drugs. We take the drugs to the richest, the most privileged of physical environments, Piedmont, Montclair. And we sell them to those people because they're just bored silly. They work 6 in the morning till 10 at night. Their life revolves around money. They have no idea what poverty is, what abuse is, what a checkered history is and how it impacts you. And then when the money comes back, I take the money to Costco. I buy diapers, I buy food, I buy medicine. And near the end of the book, he looks at this again, Indian kid, and says, if you think this is easy, this is what I'm going to do. Now, this is after some years after there's a good amount of trust and faith that this black kid has in this Indian kid. Says, you be the hero for one day, you be the leader for one day, and just see how difficult it is. And this Indian king couldn't survive it, but just too much. Okay. Now, I have no idea how that usually works out. All I know is that for many of us in this class, the most comfortable thing to do to understand something is look at it from far away. Take some notes. It's like people asking me, can I take notes to this class in this class? I say, yeah, you can take notes. But the notes are not going to do any good. First, you're taking notes on things that are being said to you by an 60-year-old man. I come from a different culture. I have a different set of experiences. You have no idea the intentions and where these ideas come from. All you do is just take notes. And what the hell do you do with these notes? Then you Americanize it. You inject the 18-year-old perspective on it. And then it's completely contaminated. You really want to understand what I'm talking about? Come to my office every single day. Okay.
I said not to go to your office.
Yeah.
Just say.
Smart ass. And so looks at the first moth and says, okay, you go on this quest. Now, the other thing is, as you start any journey in life, any journey, it doesn't really matter. Can you shut that thing off, please? Now, whenever you're a student of something or you're in pursuit of something, what you imagine is that you have this great capacity. You start and you can finish, and you can fully understand it. That's how everything begins. Imagine all those moments you fell in love. Imagine all those moments you walked on Telegraph and you saw some homeless kids and you said, you know what, I'm going to give them some money. And after 5 minutes you realize, you're running out of money and you don't want to give your money away to these people. So the first thing, again, you need to understand about yourself is that there is this assumption, imagination, that you have capacity for greatness. You go home, you watch Roger Federer play tennis, you watch Magnus Carlsen play chess, you watch Tiger Woods play golf, and you say, yes, I'm going to go buy myself a hockey stick and play golf. And I'm going to be greater than Tiger Woods. And then after a while, you realize that instead of you practicing for 10 hours a day, well, you sit back and watch Breaking Bad for 10 hours and you play golf only for a minute. So all of us have this assumption that we have capacity to achieve greatness. And what you have in the first moth is the following. He goes on this journey, eventually finds the fire. He just looks at it. You read the dialogues of Plato, and that's all you do. You just look at it. You enjoy the moments, you enjoy the minutes as you're reading the text, and then the moment your friends call, you walk away. It doesn't mean you don't have the capacity to be inspired. You do. Inspiration is just short-lived. In my short, little, pathetic life, I have been in about maybe 4 or 5 mass movements. One, a full-blown revolution. People screaming for justice. And one of the nice things about mass movements is that the basic poison of human nature goes away. Greed goes away. Lust goes away. You become charitable. You become kind and compassionate in so many different ways. It's kind of like falling in love. You do things that humanly are not possible. Okay? You sit and wait by the phone for hours. And even if you feel like you've been betrayed, the moment he or she calls you, it's as if nothing has happened. The wrinkles have been ironed out by a simple phone call, hearing his or her voice. Okay? Now, the first moth assumes that because he has seen fire, he has understood fire. He just looks at fire from a distance. If any of you in this class have been to Montclair, there is a road called Snake Road. Beautiful houses in the woods. Imagine for a moment, if you've seen the show on TV, the sitcom Prince of Bel-Air, you have Carlton, and then you have Will Smith. Will Smith knows exactly what it means to be black, knows racism, knows poverty, knows abuse, knows history. Carlton, on the other hand, he doesn't know any of it. But he sees black people. Maybe even he has read a couple of books about the black culture and the black movement. But that's all he has done. He has looked at them. Okay. So what you have in the first moth is that he sees what fire looks like. He looks at the flames, and then he journeys back. And the problem with the first moth is that he doesn't really have the curiosity to go any further. He just sits, he looks, and is easily satisfied. Now, there is a good amount of pain. I'm not going to dismiss that completely. There is a good amount of pain and longing and curiosity nevertheless. But it's really not sufficient for complete or at least a holistic understanding. So the moth goes back, looks at the king and says, I know what fire is. Now, the other thing I should probably say before going any further is that moths usually travel during night. We don't see moths chasing after fire in daytime when the sun is out. And there is a reason. If you have a life, any of you in this class, if you have a life and you're okay with your life, there isn't much darkness in your life. You have pursuits, you have purpose, you have identity, you have relevance. Is it true just as simply being a human being once in a while you get confused, you suffer anxiety, there is fear, there is dread? Sure. Is that enough to completely overhaul your psyche, get rid of your history, and put you, as it were, in the cloud of unknowing or under it? The answer is no. So the first task of being a moth is that there has to be a certain quality to you and to your life where you're just messed up. But you have to be messed up in a very, very specific way. Just because you're broken, it doesn't mean you're a moth. It just means you're broken. And the sort of fire you're looking for is not going to be perhaps maybe the fire of, say, someone who's always longed to have a father figure in their life. Maybe it's just to find, a good therapist who can listen, someone who can take care of. You're not looking for a Jesus Christ or a Socrates or a Plato or a Malcolm X. You're simply looking for a father figure. And that's not a bad thing. Okay? The moth journeys back to the king and says, fire illuminates its surrounding. It removes darkness and replaces it with light. In Hinduism, there is a figure whose business is to remove darkness and bring about light, to remove confusion and bring about clarity. And they're usually called gurus, gu and ru, which means someone who takes away darkness or confusion and replaces it with something a bit more positive. Now, the best kind of teachers you ever find is they're usually invisible. They don't advertise, you know. You can't see their faces, you can't see their names. You accidentally knock on their door and you just feel something about them, towards them. And depending on the sort of a moth you are, the sort of interaction you have with them, you'll either pursue them or you just say, interesting, and then you'll go home. Okay? So, the king sits back and listens to the story of this first moth and says, well, that's not bad. It is true that when the power goes out, flashlights can be very helpful. It's very true that when you have a date and you bring them home and you turn off the lights and you light a candle, it can be very, very helpful. It can change the human psyche. It can create brand new emotions. Okay? But the king also understands the dangerousness of simply looking at fire and assuming that you've understood fire. This morning I was walking around campus and I saw this 5-year-old holding hands with a 2-year-old. I mean, they're not 5 and 2, but they're really 5 and 2. And I said to myself, this is beautiful, they're in love. And I'm sure if the father was to go to the young woman and say, the guy is a loser, leave him, she would say, oh no, Dad, what do you know about love? And the father tries, but the young woman probably has concrete in her head, so he'll just walk away in frustration. For those of you who want to know really what love is, if you have grandparents, you're still married. If you have parents, you're still married, and they've been married for about 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they understand love. It's not just about emotions. It's about anger. It's about fear. It's about sacrifice, compromise, frustration, and being able to kind of survive under an avalanche of crap. It's not just these yuppie feelings. So the king looks at this first moth and says, it's good, but it's not complete. Imagine if the first moth was to go somewhere, sit, being fully inspired by his experience, and write a book about the nature of fire. And let's just say Penguin Publishing Company published 10, 20, 30 million copies and just gave them away for free. Every single one of us in this classroom would walk around saying, fire just illuminates, there's nothing more to it. And that's one of the things that Plato warned us about. Be very worried, be very afraid of the artists that occupy a culture and society. They will sell you the wrong things. You will believe in the wrong things. And those wrong things will guide your life. And when time passes, you will pay the price. Go fall in love at the age of 18. Then when you're 19 or 20, suffer a broken heart and remain jaded for the rest of your life. So, being fearful of the power of a little understanding and a little knowledge, and that's what all of us have, little understanding and little knowledge, that ruins life, not only ours but others. And so the moth, the king moth, looks at this tiny little moth and says, I'm going to kill you. You don't deserve to live. But why? You're going to share your findings with other people. You're going to contaminate them. You're going to corrupt them. I can't do that to my culture, to my people, to my society. I'm the shepherd of my people. And the first moth is executed. Now, some of you, of course, may find the story interesting, some of you. But if you were to take the story seriously and take it to heart, whenever someone asks you a question, before you respond, embrace the fact that you have little understanding and little knowing. It's best to keep your mouth shut. Unless you want to further contaminate yourself and other people. But that's only for good students, not for us.
How do you determine whether that's how do you determine how much information you have with us?
You can't. Yeah. Time will tell you. Time will tell you.
And then I also was wondering, like, is there some sort of exercise to, like,
No exercise.
well, wait. Like, a tool that you can use
No
to
tool.
remind yourself that
No.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. When you talk about a tool, you're talking about an alarm clock. Like you want to wake up at 6 and your clock goes off and you wake up. The sort of animals that we are, after a while of being exposed to the same thing over and over again, your body becomes numb to it. You won't wake up. So you have to keep changing the sound, the tunes, the volume, and you can't do it on your own. No one can do anything on their own. You know, an elephant gives birth to a baby elephant, and 2 minutes later, the baby elephant walks. A bird, a tiny little chick, after maybe, I don't know, a couple days, they begin to fly. Human beings, it takes us a year to be able to walk. And I don't know if you have ever paid attention to infants. First, they roll around, you know, that takes some time. Then they have to exert a good amount of will and effort and blood and sweat to just sit up. You know, and if they have a younger sibling or older sibling that they can look at, imitate, they will begin to walk faster. But if they're the only child, it takes them a while, unless you take them to the park and they play with other kids. And then after a while, you know, they, with a great amount of effort, they begin to stand. But they fall again. They stand. You know. So the point I'm trying to make, it takes human beings a long time to understand anything worth understanding. And if you're familiar with this kid whose name is T.S. Eliot, if there is anything out there that's worth learning, it can't be taught. No one can teach it to you. You can't get it in books. It's impossible. So the first moth is dead. The second moth. He goes on the same quest, but for some strange reason, he has more of a capacity. He doesn't just look at the fire, he flies closer to the fire. Life is not just. People are not made equally. You have Malcolm X, and then you have imitators. You have Gandhi, and then you have imitators. Nothing wrong with that. At least you're not imitating Snoop Dogg or Britney Spears.